Yes, the attendee disappeared.
Oh, okay, that wasn't me then. Okay, is Dave here?
He is in the office. He may still be in his meeting he had earlier this morning.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll get it started.
Okay.
We'll have the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Legislative Advocacy Committee meeting Thursday, March 20th, 2025, 10 a.m. Call to order, and I'll ask for a roll call.
Yep. Director Paul?
Here.
Director Riley?
Here.
And just a note that Director Riley is attending as the alternate and Supervisor Daniel is not available to attend today.
Okay, perfect.
And Chair Oglesby?
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Did anyone have any additions or corrections to the agenda?
None.
Okay.
Well, I did meet with an Aqua rep yesterday. It won't affect the agenda, but it'll affect the conversation.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Okay, we'll open up to public comment. Members of the public wish to address us may do so for up to 3 minutes. Public comment is open.
Chair Oglesby, I have no attendees.
Okay, we'll leave public comment open for another couple seconds.
I have no corrections to the minutes.
We're talking about public comment now, so
Yeah.
seeing no one, hearing no one, public comment is closed. We'll go to action items. I think the first thing is to adopt the minutes from September 30th, 2024. All the members should have received copies of the minutes. I'm sure they were published. Are there any comments on the minutes? Let's take it out to public comment before we take a vote. Public comment is open on the action item, adoption of the minutes.
No public.
We have no public in attendance, Mayor.
Okay, public comment is closed. What is the will of the committee?
I'm going to abstain from commenting and voting on the minutes because I was not there.
Well, we need somebody to move the minutes.
I'll move the minutes. I know it's a procedural process.
That's all it is. You don't even have to be there.
Yeah, I move approval.
Especially if it limits your ability to move your action. Okay, it's been probably moved, and I will second it. All those in favor use the correct sign of voting, which is aye.
Aye.
Aye, and I believe Director Paul is going to abstain.
Right.
Motion passed by 2 votes, Sarah. 2-0, and 1 abstention. Okay, next item is the discussion of our reports from our lobbyists, so to speak. Let me just open up public comment on that. So once we get into it, we can just keep moving. Public comment is open on our reports from our consultants.
And we have no members of the public in attendance.
Thank you so much. Seeing no one here, no one, public comment is closed. Let's go to item number 2, reports from Ferguson Group on federal legislative and regulatory activities. Dave, you want to open us up, get us started, frame the discussion?
Yeah, Roger Gwynn is here. We have 2 items in the packet. One is kind of a quarterly update newsletter, and the other is the federal ledge tracker. I believe I included, I'll have to check the packet, a release on the reinstitution of the Fish Act, which was a Feinstein bill, but brought back by Calvert here in California. But Roger, I'll turn it over to you for the general update. Roger, you're frozen.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I apologize. I missed the intro, but I'll just assume it was just to give a brief overview. I've actually never had that happen. It just all of a sudden zapped as soon as Dave started talking, and I was removed from the from Zoom. But in any case, yeah, just a brief report. The most recent major action was the action on the continuing resolution. Congress did move just a little over a week ago, agreed to move forward with a continuing resolution, or less than a week ago, actually. So move forward with the continuing resolution and averted a shutdown. Basically, the funding under the continuing resolution moves forward at the federal level, consistent with fiscal year 24 funding levels. There are a few exceptions, the main exception being the dollars for FY24 earmarks were removed from the base level of funding for the different agencies that were provided funding under the FY24 bill. There are a few increases here and there. One to reflect really the incoming administration's priorities: additional funding for defense, additional funding for immigration enforcement, additional reduction at the for IRS funding, and a small, again, reduction for Bureau of Reclamation funding. We reflected that, and that largely was a result of a reduction to reflect earmarked dollars that were allocated in FY24 that were not available in FY25 under the continuing resolution. And it's really a modest amount of money. It was only $40 million for the Bureau of Reclamation. Similarly, the Corps was provided funding as well consistent with FY24 funding levels. The Corps is also required to put together a funding plan over the next 60 days, basically what they call a work plan, which is the allocation of their budget, and they'll be doing that again over the next now 55 days or so. In terms of Monterey Peninsula's water management district's funding priorities, it does have an impact again on earmarked dollars. There were no earmarks in the continuing resolution; those were removed. And you had there were, again, just as a reminder, there were two earmarks that the district had submitted in FY25. One was for $750,000 under the Corps of Engineers for the Monterey Peninsula Stormwater Diversion and Reconciliation Recycling Project. And this is basically funding through, again, a new authority you secured, and Congressman Panetta, Senator Padilla secured on your behalf in the fiscal year, or in the 2022 Water Resources Development Act. And that's again for $20 million for water infrastructure investments within your service area. And Senator Padilla had requested $750,000 for your project. You'd also requested funding for the Seaside Municipal Well Water Security Project. $3.2 million was requested there. Representative Panetta had secured on your behalf a little over $1.1 million for that effort. And that exact dollar amount was a reflection of a general ceiling that was put on all Democratic requests in this particular account. Basically, on the Democratic side, what they did, they were given a block of funding through the EPA State and Tribal Assistance Grants account, and they allocated that equally among all projects. And so it came up with kind of an odd number, but $1,105,800, and that was made available for Seaside. But again, that was not approved in the final bill, the final continuing resolution. So anyway, that's where we are right now. These projects
Roger,
resubmitted. Yes.
Should we just assume then that that's permanently dead?
No, well, it's permanently dead for FY25. Yes.
Right. And
yes.
and so unless we resubmit it and do another earmark request, and that's the most unfortunate one, because the stormwater diversion and recycling were kind of wish list projects, but that Seaside well, again, I know what's going on in in Congress right now, but we had kind of assumed that was done, that we were going
Right.
to do the 1.1. And Seaside really does need a new well. So I guess the direction is we got to start over if we're going to see some funding.
Correct.
In the CR, you said that they got 20 million for environmental infrastructure, undesignated to anything. Is there a remote chance that we could at least start negotiating a community participation agreement with the Corps under
The
that?
chances, the chances there, I mean, the districts have this, the next 50 plus days to put together their plan. And the
Yeah.
districts will be competing basically for those dollars. So absolutely,
So we should get a letter into our, I forget her name, the contact in Tommy's aide there in
Mhm.
San Francisco. I should send her a letter.
I'm not sure you'll even need to send her any additional correspondence, but check in with her would be a good idea, to do
Okay.
that. And so
All right.
just to follow up and see if they need anything else. I think your letter, I don't recall the date on your, letter of interest that was submitted a
Yeah,
while
and
back.
she sent an email, I think in December or January, renewing that and updating the information. So I should just touch base with her on that one.
Right. So they're requiring that those be updated annually. And so we just want to make sure that that's, I think that otherwise you had a funding package which was solid, it gave very clear clear opportunities for them to go after funding at different levels to move your project forward. And it really is just, it's going to be tough, honestly, as we always know, but because this is just a small amount of money available nationwide, but
Yeah,
there will be some money allocated that way.
no, I hear you. So, Mr. Mayor, if you heard that pretty clearly, we just lost you $1,000,001.
No, I heard it. I heard it clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just need to keep the advocacy going, and I appreciate you. So we'll just keep moving.
Yep.
So we'll get that resubmitted and follow up with you on that. Beyond that, I'm going to come back to Chris, just going to give you an update on some of the pending water legislation. I'm just going to touch on a couple other things that were in our report, just to make you aware of it, that WIFIA continues to get attention in the congressional side. There will be some legislation on that too that'll be coming forward. I know you guys have taken advantage of that. The district and your partners have, and in the past, been interested in that. And it's there's a bill that will be considered going forward that will actually suggest some an extension of the repayment period for some water-related infrastructure, allowing it to go beyond the 35 to 40 years under current law to extend it up to 55 years. So just will allow some additional flexibility on your repayment if in the event that you want to take advantage of a longer repayment period and lower annual debt service costs. There's also in our last report, we talked about the fact that a number of members on the House and Senate side were encouraging the Biden administration at that time to make adjustments raise the ceiling on available funding under the recycling program, and to raise it from $30 million to $40 million. And that was done in the last few days of the Biden administration. There is honestly some, the Trump administration will have flexibility on how they deal with water recycling going forward. They could actually hold it at 30 million at the original earlier ceiling, or accept the 40 million. We expect that they'll accept the 40 million, but we really won't know until the next grant round of funding, comes out, and they indicate what their policy is going to be going forward. But right now, our expectation is it's going to be at the $40 billion level, a higher level of funding. the Congress is also going to get started on the Water Resources Development Act, which is a 2-year process. In the 24 process, FY24 process, you were advocating for some flexibility on the way monies were made available to non-federal sponsors of these projects, like the district, and to allow you to get these funds more on a grant basis and basically be reimbursed for your expenses rather than having the Corps having to manage the contracts and handle the funds on their side. That was not included in the Water Resource Development Act for 2024, so that'll be an issue that we'll want to continue to pursue and engage on, and in the 2024 Water Resources Development Act process.
Hey, Roger, did any other, I know there were other water agencies other than ourselves asking for that. Were there any other water agencies that are not Ferguson Group clients that also asked for that?
There are quite a few. There are literally there are over 500 of these authorities nationwide, and so there were not on a unanimous basis, but there were quite a few. There were certainly in the dozens of districts across the country that were asking for these changes.
Okay.
So it's just something that the Corps has been resisting, and we'll need to continue to talk to them about it. I think the administration, Trump administration, will be interested in it because it does provide an opportunity for greater efficiency in the allocation of these funds, and that's certainly one of their priorities.
Yeah.
Beyond that, we also reported on, there are, in terms of the incoming administration, a lot of nominees, are yet to be, or there are a lot of positions for which we do not have nominees yet. While they've completed the Senate has completed the confirmation of the secretaries at that level of nominees, they're really just now starting to turn to the lower level folks, the assistant secretaries, deputy secretaries, things of that sort. And so that'll be occurring over the coming months. We do not have a new nominee for Commissioner of Bureau of Reclamation yet. For example, a number of these positions have not been announced yet. We reported in the last quarterly meeting, legislative committee meeting, that Representative Huffman was making a push to become the top Democrat on the House Natural Resources Committee. Just want to report back that did occur, and Representative Huffman is now the ranking Democrat on the House Natural Resources Committee, and certainly that'll be of help to the state of California, to you, in all issues that fall within their jurisdiction, which they have a fairly broad jurisdiction with the Bureau of Reclamation, dealing with Fish and Wildlife Service, with National Marine Fisheries Service, other a number of agencies of importance to the district. In addition, Senator Schiff, being elected, Senator Schiff was named as a member of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. So now the state has 2 members on that committee, both Senator Padilla and Senator Schiff on their Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. And there are a number of key issues within the jurisdiction of that committee, including EPA, Corps of Engineers, and Department of Transportation programs, a number of those. And so, going forward, that'll be great to have 2 senators representing the state there. And we've, just as a reminder, that we'll be talking to Dave and you about going forward about the opportunities within the Department of Transportation. For example, they're going to be doing a 5-year transportation reauthorization bill, which is already underway in terms of the hearing process, that kind of thing. And that'll be concluded, we hope, next year. And that's a $500 billion plus piece of legislation, which includes mandatory spending, which is basically the same thing as appropriations. So these are funds that go out automatically outside of the appropriations process. And so there's a real opportunity for some assistance there, which is a kind of a non-traditional source for the district to look at, but there are funds there, for example, to deal with fish passage and things of that sort, significant dollars that are likely that are currently available and that are likely to be available going forward for some of those issues as well, culvert replacement, and again, just general fish passage related concerns. And then finally, before I turn it back to Chris, just congressional review actions, review actions are underway as well. The folks on the Hill are really looking at decisions that were made in the last few weeks and months of the Biden administration, and through the Congressional Review Act, they can roll back some of those provisions. And there haven't been a lot that have been raised that have anything specifically to do with water per se, that, other than I'll just mention that there are some, there's obviously the waters of the U.S. issue is being revisited just generally, which certainly is of importance. And beyond that, in terms of specific rules, so there's the listing of the longfin smelt in the Delta that's also potentially going to be a subject of our Congressional Review Act that'll be, undone in this process. With that, let me just turn to Chris. He's got a couple of pieces of legislation just wanted to bring to your attention that have been introduced. Chris.
Great. Thanks, Roger. Hi, just a quick few updates on our legislative tracker. We're tracking bills from the previous Congress, the 118th, that have been reintroduced, as well as other bills of interest. So we'll cover a couple really quickly. On page 3 is HR 338. That's Rep. Costa's bill, the Every Drop Counts bill. That's a groundwater recharge issue, and the focus there is a 25% grant for groundwater recharge, expanding the pot of money that exists in a BIL funded bipartisan infrastructure law small storage program funded account. That would model after Title 16, which is a program that's been used before, and allows for following a feasibility study. It would open up a larger pool of money that everyone here would be able to pursue and essentially go in a competitive grant program for that. There's a markup on the bill in the next couple of weeks in the House side. It has some bipartisan support, so it'll be interesting to see if there's any movement there following that. And then if that were to pass through the House, then it would need to go through the Senate as well to get codified into law. The second bill to note is Rep. Huffman's Water Conservation Rebate Tax Parity Act. That's HR 1871. Dave's clapping. That's a bill that we've been tracking, and just assists rebate programs that exist throughout. It provides more accessibility to the public and creates a mutual connection of utilities to ensure that there's an exemption on taxes so that it's attractive to the public and also helpful to the utilities as well. So we're following those bills and other bills, and we'll be sure to continue to track as they go along and matriculate through the House and the Senate chambers. With respect to grant opportunities, that's been highly publicized in the news. Currently, agencies and departments are finishing their review per the Trump administration executive order. So we're slowly seeing opportunities get republished, NOFO's funding opportunities get announced, and we expect that to continue. One of note is Fish and Wildlife Services expected to release their fish passage NOFO here in the next few weeks. So after the review, the grant opportunities are becoming unfrozen and in many cases are now back online. So I'll leave it there unless anyone has any questions.
No, that's great, Chris. And before we get on to the Sacramento and state issues, a few comments on federal things. So Carl Stock, who's our regional U.S. Bureau chief, put his name in for the buyout for the early retirement plan. So we're going to have a transition in our federal liaison. We had developed a very good working relationship with Ernest, his predecessor, who decided to go do other things. And Carl, I think he was only on the job maybe a year. It won't set us back any because I think that the 10 million for Pure Water Monterey expansion through the Bureau has not been on hold, has not been pulled back. You know, we have a funding agreement in place. And so, but we are right now trying to set up the May meetings, I think May 14th, with the Bureau representatives during the Aqua Conference. And we'll see who's there, perhaps filling Carl's shoes. The other thing is, you saw me applauding the Huffman bill. He's tried this. I think this is the third effort, but
Right.
we do 300,000 to 500,000 of rebate checks every year, and we issue a bunch of W-2s because water is the poor stepchild to power, and so all the PG&E rebates have been exempt from taxation, not deemed to be income, but all the water rebates have been deemed to be income. And it's a real hassle for the large rebate recipients when we do, like high efficiency clothes washers and so forth. So it's a little tiny impact, but we're happy to see it go through. We also elected not to submit any earmark requests on behalf of the district this year. Probably good wisdom given the environment in DC and what happened with the continuing resolution. But we also did not submit, or we won't submit, the window's not closed yet, on the state's FGRP. It's a fisheries restoration program, which is actually federal dollars on the Pacific salmon, Northwest salmon. The federal dollars are then allocated to Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and California state departments to then put out to the locals. And we did not apply for anything there because the California dollars really aren't that big, and we don't have a current ask. But generally, we will watch that Costa bill because that may provide some sourcing for Delray Oaks and Seaside stormwater funding. And I know Seaside is trying to get credit for the Broadway stormwater diversion as recharge to the Seaside groundwater basin. So we'll follow that one on that behalf. So, and I think that wraps it for the federal actions. So. One last thing, Roger and Chris. We have hired Mike McCullough over from Monterey One Water, so he will become our, assistant general manager. And for my directors, Mike is often on our calls with the Ferguson group, and he has spearheaded all of our contact with the Bureau of Reclamation for the last 2 to 3 years.
Thank you. Are there any questions, issues, or concerns from the directors?
I have a question through the chair. Dave, in a simple version, what's the process of the district sponsoring a number of the legislative initiatives? But what's the background data? Who prepares that? Do you, do the like, would the city of Seaside be the one that would be preparing the project description and all of that? And you
right. That's a great question. So for the earmark request last year, we the district initially prepared the Seaside well. That's why it was called water security, because we invented a name that made it sound better than redundant or replacement well. So we prepared that, but then right before the deadline, city staff kind of came back to life. You may remember that their city manager was in transition right about that time. And so we stepped aside, and Roger, contacted Panetta's office and basically pulled our name off the request, put Seaside's name on the request, and Seaside filed a letter. But then we kind of intervened again on what the budget really was for the project and what the specifications for the project were. So then we worked with Panetta's staff to clarify what the true budget was, because the fire chief didn't understand, while he was sitting in the city manager's chair, what the project actually was. So it was a combination, but yeah, through my office, we did the application, and but Roger's office actually, I think, filed the electronic form through Panetta's office for that one. Also, for our own behalf, the environmental infrastructure, the Ferguson group filed the electronic filing for that one. But we, again, through my office, secured letters of support from City of Monterey, City of Seaside, and Monterey One Water on that one. So it's a combination, but yeah, it usually starts in this office here.
And so when money is appropriated or allocated, does the money come through the district, or does it go directly to the project agency?
Right. In this particular case, the Bureau monies, for example, with Monterey One Water, would go directly to Monterey One Water. And I think our role was our role was filling in the blanks on the application through Monterey One Water and letter of support, but then the actual management of the grant is through them. As they spend the money, they submit the invoices back to the Bureau. On the pure water expansion on the state grants, so Laird got us a piece for well number 6, the injection well number 6. And we stepped in and got 11 million also through the state Department of Water Resources. We manage those. And so it's kind of funny, because we'll get an invoice from Monterey One Water, and then we'll prepare an invoice to the state. We'll submit the invoice to the state. We get reimbursed, and then we pay Monterey One Water. So we're managing that roughly 16 million of state monies. But
so whether the district is in the money track or outside the money track is dependent on what the project description, I mean, what the project eligibility requirements are. And
exactly.
Okay.
And if we ever solve the riddle of the Army Corps of Engineers environmental infrastructure, it's a Section 219 program, that'll be us directly. And we have there's about 6 or 7 little projects that could feed Pure Water Monterey with some additional source waters. Think in terms of like Roberts Lake in Seaside, or Del Monte Lake in Naval Post Graduate School, Lake Aguajito in Monterey. They're tiny little projects, a series of them, but collectively, it could be some more source water for the project. We would manage that through us, and we'd sign an agreement with the Army Corps. So we're still trying to, as I said, crack that riddle. In the Seaside well issue, while we carried that forward and we thought it was a slam dunk and we thought it would find its way through the CRs, because it made it through the first continuing resolution, but it didn't make it through this, last week's drama. That one would have been just direct to the city of Seaside, even though, as I said, we were probably the stronger participant or source of information through Panetta's office on that, but it would have been directly with the city of Seaside.
Okay, thank you for that.
Anyone else? Okay, let's go on.
One
Go ahead,
question from
Karen.
you, Chair, yes. The Fish Act, reintroduction of the Fish Act, can you tell us what impact this might have on us?
Yeah, well, the Fish Act, what it does is basically would move the areas of responsibility from that cover anadromous fish, steelhead and such, in your area from the National Marine Fisheries Service under NOAA, under Department of Commerce. It would move those responsibilities from that department over to the Department of Interior. And so it'd be under Fish and Wildlife Service. And, what the benefit of it is that what people see as benefit, the benefit of it anyway, is that Fish and Wildlife Service has responsibility right now for non-anadromous fish as well as terrestrial species. And so it would allow for more a holistic approach to conservation, to environmental restoration projects and that kind of thing, so that it could be done in a more holistic way, looking at all the different species as they're making judgments about one species or another. The resistance to this, and there is significant resistance to moving that responsibility over anadromous fish to Fish and Wildlife Service. It's really from the commercial fishermen who have spent decades developing strong relationships, with the Department of Commerce, and are most concerned about regulations, not about the restoration side that, is of concern to you or where you engage on this, but they're, in terms of the impact on rules and regulations that apply to ocean harvest and that kind of thing. And so that's also part of that responsibility.
There's a great book by David Brinkley, who's a historian and author, professor at Rice, about the National Environmental Policy Act, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, all of those early, 1972 era acts under the Nixon administration. And the fact that our regulator, the National Marine Fisheries Service, or NIMS, is under NOAA, and NOAA is under Commerce. And that was a compromise made all the way back in whenever it was, 1972-ish. So the Endangered Species Act sits there, and you've got the U.S. Fish and Wildlife folks who sit over in the Department of Interior, I believe. Is that right, Roger? Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
And so our regulators, and you may have seen, Karen, that 6 NIMPs, or no, I guess it was 6 NOAA employees on the Monterey Peninsula were given their release, fired. Most of those were the National Weather Service people, but we've been waiting to see what happens to our NIMPs people, because they were all initially requested or commanded to return to the office, but the Santa Rosa office had been closed and downsized, so there's really no place for them to go, and several of them relocated. And so, like, the lead person, woman named Mandy Ingham, actually moved from wherever up in Sonoma County down to Santa Cruz. And while she ostensibly is returned to the office, not all of those people have returned to a physical office because there's not a physical office to go to. But we are waiting to see what happens to our 3 primary points of contact in the National Marine Fisheries Service. So they would be reassigned to Interior under this. But we're not even sure they will still be there when and if that would happen. So it will have an impact on the district at some point if it passes. But even if it doesn't pass, the current regulatory regime may
Is in
change.
chaos. Let's
Yeah.
face it.
It is
It's in
chaos.
chaos.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen to the Department of Interior at this
Well,
point.
and I'll be honest, that half the reason we didn't even apply for an earmark this year was just due to the expected chaos.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Welcome
Okay,
to our
thank
world.
you. All right, next we'll go to.
thanks,
item
Chris
3.
and Roger.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris and Roger. Really appreciate the detailed update and the work you do on our behalf.
Yes.
You know, it's I was in DC last week, so I understand the controversies and
Right.
you know, the back and forth. And like you said, that's what we were hearing is a lot of those undersecretaries are not even been named yet. So everybody else is waiting for their boss to be named and what is it, confirmed before they even make any decisions. So
Right.
I appreciate you.
Yeah,
We'll
thank
move
you so
on.
much.
No, thank you. We'll move on to reports from JE&A and Associates on legislative status and bills tracking. Go ahead, Dave, set us up. Dave,
You're on mute.
what?
My bad.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
two
go ahead,
items in
Dave.
the packet. Lori and John have prepared kind of an update memorandum. And then there's a bill tracker. The tracker has gone through our fingers in consultation with Lori, and so it's reduced in scope. And there's a couple of bills that Aqua has an interest in that we've actually taken off, are not even tracking because they don't influence us on the coast. But John, do you want to start, or is it Lori?
Sure. Yeah, no, I'll go ahead and get started. And thank you, Chair and Dave, for this opportunity. Getting ready for this meeting today, I didn't realize that it had been since September, since the last time we met. So there's obviously been quite a bit that's gone on since between then and now. And Dave, I was just recollecting that you know, back in December when you and I got together to just kind of talk a little bit about the coming year and so forth, how far that seems you know, since it's talking about, you know, things at the federal level and changes there, and you know, the moratorium and possibilities there, and introduction of legislation. It just seems like you know, all that nice talk when everyone was out of session was a lot of good dreaming, and now we're dealing with the impacts of all these changes. So the legislature did return in January, and you know, we're now in a new two-year session, the 25-26 legislative session. So yeah, at least here in Sacramento, the first couple of months is just, you know, gearing up. We've got quite a slew of new legislators, so newbies. I believe it, Lori, it's about 1/3 of the assembly are new members. So they're learning their way around the Capitol, and you know, got their new appointments and so forth. So that's been a learning process for them. Bill introduction, you know, started in December, and it was trickling in until the deadline, which was the last week of February, where we ended up with a total of over 2,500 bills introduced. You know, the governor started out with the beginning of the year with his proposed budget in early January, and back then things seemed to be at least somewhat stable, and back then we were even looking at a surplus of some $363 million in surplus monies for the year, although the Legislative Analyst's Office was talking about more of a possible $2 billion deficit. But you know, those were all things that kind of got turned upside down. You know, early January we had the devastating fires down south, which required a considerable amount of effort toward you know, just dealing with the fire itself and CAL FIRE and so forth, providing additional funding for that. You know, dealing with FEMA at the federal level to get funding to those people immediately, and you know, pulling money out of our budget that the state hadn't planned to, you know, for you know, covering some of those costs down in Southern California, something in the neighborhood of $2 billion right off the bat, you know, for that, and then you know, the problems with the insurance companies and so forth. The insurance commissioner was dealing with all the companies up and down the state who are providing service, who are now canceling service and so forth. So that has resulted in a lot of legislation introduced in those particular areas. Wildfire protection. You heard some of the wild stories about water and the lack of water and fire hydrants not working and so forth. So there's been, I know the early part of the year attending the Aqua meetings, some of the other lobbyists that were there at those meetings talking about, what their cities were proposing in the way of legislation to deal with the lack of water, or at least what wasn't really true, at least what was mentioned at the presidential level. But still, they've got to relook at how they were doing things and how they can better handle those this year. So in the area of water, there was that type of discussion and legislation introduced and so forth. So a lot going on in those areas. And then you throw on top of that what we've all been seeing at the federal level with the new administration. That's been almost a day-to-day effect on California, whether it's a loss of federal dollars, immediate loss of federal dollars, as you were talking earlier, Dave. The appointments that have been or the positions that have been just abolished, and now people are scrambling to see who we talk to and who we're going to be working with, and what happened to those type of offices that we go to on a regular basis and no longer are there. The people are no longer there. So we've seen a lot going on. Beginning this year, though, we did look at, and Dave will talk about this later on, about some proposed legislation. We talked about, the lifting of the moratorium, and at least, how we might go about that, this year, because of some of the good things that have been happening in the Monterey area. And so forth. So those things have been, in discussion, and we're working through those. And like I said, we'll talk about those more as we go along in our report today. The mayor, it was nice to have him here in Sacramento in January. He was here on behalf of the city of Seaside, but we made the rounds with the speaker and Senator Laird and Senator Addis. We took the opportunity to talk briefly about the moratorium and the possible lifting of it. I think there was some interest and enthusiasm about that, and we'll see how far that goes. But that was
and on that topic, John, and just for the edification of my board, we had a meeting with the deputy director of the State Water Board and legal counsel. I think it was January 6th. And John and I were ready to start setting meetings, including the water and environment person for Robert Rivas's staff. And then we had a bunch of disconnected but potentially impactful issues surrounding the permitting of the pure water expansion, which may have affected its implementation date. I think we've solved those now, but it took a few weeks to sort them out. So I think we're going to be ready to start setting meetings, what I call the informal set of meetings before we file any petition for modification. So John and Lori are going to work with me to set those up. I want McCullough to come over here. He starts April 3rd because he's developed a pretty good friendship with at least one of the water board members. Obviously, which is Sean McGuire. I've got a decent relationship with, actually a pretty good relationship with Dee Adamo, who's also got a sister who works at the county, so she's got a connection to the peninsula. And then, of course, John Laird has a long-standing relationship with Joaquin Esquivel, the chair. So we've got 3 out of 5 of the State Water Board members where we've got a very good relationship. So I think in April, we're going to schedule a visit to Sacramento to start that CDO lifting process. You saw the letter to the editor on Saturday or Friday, whenever it was over the weekend, where CalAm seems to be circling its wagons around the desal plant again. And so it's going to be interesting. But John, we are ready to get moving.
Okay.
I'll be in contact with you guys to help set meetings up.
All right, good to hear.
I just want to add, if I could quickly, that the item in the Herald was a commentary on the editorial page, not a letter to the editor. So it was much more prominently presented.
Yeah, it was a
than
guest
the letter.
opinion. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So those are some of the things that went on in January, and I appreciate the mayor joining us over here. It was helpful. As he mentioned, we were back in Washington this last week on with the National League of Cities, and had the opportunity to meet with Congressman Panetta, Senator Schiff, and Senator Padilla, and got an opportunity to see firsthand as they were coming into meetings with some of the groups, walking out of these caucus meetings and budget meetings and so forth, and all the way to the end. We left on Thursday, and on Fridays when they passed the concurrent resolution. So it was pretty hot and heavy, but it was interesting to see all the disconnect at the federal level in various offices, all the way to the Pentagon. We had a meeting in the Pentagon, I think on Wednesday, and the people that we were talking to with regards to real estate and so forth were talking from the position of, well, if I'm here the next time you come to Washington D.C., we'll be prepared to discuss this and that. And it's these were people at a pretty high level there at the Army. But anyhow, having said that, a lot of changes this year, and we're all dealing in it on a day-to-day basis, and that's a big picture. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Lori to get into the actual.
Hey, where'd you National League of Cities people? Where'd you stay?
The conference was held at the Marriott Marquis.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and so we were all. If we didn't stay there, we were just blocked away from that.
I convinced all my directors to not go to Aqua DC this year so we could save the budget, because we lost our water supply charge.
Yeah. So, all right.
Next year.
Yeah, it might have still been a good use of money though, Dave.
Yeah.
Okay, please continue, John.
Okay. Well, with that, I was going to turn it over to Lori to talk more about the budget and the legislation introduced.
Okay, thank you, Chair and members. So kind of to piggyback on what John was saying, the first part of your memo outlines the budget in a beautiful, perfect year. That was before the devastating LA fires and the uncertainty of disaster aid that we still have from the federal government. And this was before the massive cuts to Medicaid that were approved in the continuing resolution last week. In fact, the governor already borrowed $3.4 billion from the general fund last Friday to cover some of the costs. But one thing I just want to point out is that outside of the general fund, we have the climate bond, one of the two bonds that voters passed in November. And the idea the governor want to do is, let's be real, with the tightening general fund revenues and whatnot, is looking at this to not supplement, but supplant a lot of the state's promises and investments in water, climate resiliency, wildfire, etc. So he would like to, he wanted to, and this is, I'm going to use a lot of past tense. He wanted to break it up into 4 years, $2.7 billion, and kind of lists, where he wanted these programs. Then comes the big wildfires, and then he takes some of this money from the bond to appropriate $1.5 billion through the extraordinary session that the legislatures have called. This is the second extraordinary. The first was, quote, Trump-proofing the state with $50 million going to the Attorney General. So we're already down $1.5 billion. And we have heard, it's in the report, that the governor is looking at siphoning more money from the bond to balance his budget, to about $300 million. And then outside of that, we have groups like Aqua and the California Mutual Utilities Association and other kind of water stakeholder groups that are trying to open up the bond for more of their projects. So we are well past $2.7 billion of the $10 billion that was laid out and passed. So we anticipate a May revise by the end of the second week in May. At right now, given what's going on at the federal level, it's anyone's guess of where this budget is going to end up. So it's, kind of one of those times of like, oh, we can look and reflect back at the January budget, and I can tell you what the general fund and the total budget and the rainy day and what we're doing. But honestly, this is, one of the first times that it's really up in the air and we don't know what is going to happen and where the states, I think we may be looking at, we're going to start taking cuts. So that is kind of where we are with the budget. Some information, but a tremendous amount of uncertainty of where we're going to end up come May. And then when the budget's signed in at the end of June. Are there any questions?
Well, I have a quick question on the rainy day fund. I mean, what's the status of that compared to the budget deficit that's being, filled with other sources?
Well, the rainy day fund, so a lot of how the governor, and I think I've said it before, of how he does his budgets is very frustrating. It's multi-year budgets. So it's like Jerry Brown would say, I'm investing $2 billion into housing this year, where Newsom will say, I've invested $44 billion. Well, yes, that's over how many years, and we're not really getting it. So how this, and to answer your question, how this budget before the chaos, they said it was stabilized is because we're operating a multi-year budget. So the deal that they cut in 2024, George, is the deal that was going to wrap around for 2025. And so that deal was to pull, I believe, 12 billion last year and another, I think it was 10 billion this year. So the rainy day fund has, and there's actually 4 special funds, and because it wasn't changed, that's the one pertaining to healthcare. So we're at $11 billion remaining. So with the total, I think of all of our special funds, we're 18 to 20 billion remaining. If this budget went forward. So this was the deal that they cut last year to apply for this year. But I have a feeling that they are going to be pulling more money from these funds.
But the deal cut last year did not include the Southern California fires, right?
No, and it did not include cuts to Medicaid, and it did not include, because when you have these disasters and they're declared federal disasters is just unsurmountable of what happened in LA. The federal government usually picks up about 75% of the cost. And so now we are at, I don't know if it's a stalemate. I don't know if it's, what's going on, but with that continuing resolution, there was not the funding in there that a lot of the California legislatures and the governor had hoped for.
Thank you.
So we're still uncertain. Any other questions on the budget? Okay, so legislation, and John kind of touched upon it, multitude of bills, and this is after both leaders, Senator Mark McGuire and Speaker Robert Rivas, cut the number of bills that both senators and assembly members can introduce. They wanted them to focus on the policy more. They want them to really think about it, not introducing all these pie in the sky bills. So it used to be for 50 for the Assembly, 40 for the Senate, and now it's 35 each. And when I say 35, that is over a 2-year period. So it's not 35 per year. With that said, over 2,500 bills were still introduced. And a lot of them, and we've touched upon this before, are intent bills, spot bills. It's a bill like, hey, I want to do something in this water code, but I haven't quite figured it out, and to put legislation over. And so that deadline to basically like, you better move on that, you better put something substantive in there, or it's going to be a 2-year bill. That was this Monday. So when I get off this call, I'm going to run a report and see how many. I think it's probably going to be more about 800 bills coming through. So we should, Dave, you should expect another track coming your way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so and then I just kind of let you know like some of the drama that is going on of the speaker removing 5 Republicans from their vice chairs that they felt that were disrupting the work of the legislature and disrupting the committee process. So that's having a little bit of fallout. And then, we have lawsuits going because the governor is, if you haven't ascertained, kind of moving a little bit to the center at this point with higher aspirations, but he ordered everyone back to work. And so this is coming off the heels where the governor did win in the CalPERS lawsuit where he ordered CalPERS back and get off their hybrid schedule. And so this is actually having a big fallout just in the Sacramento region where you have, the state is the biggest employer in the state with, I think, over 225,000 state workers. And so this will be interesting to see how this plays out, and financially, because the state has been saving money because they're not paying air conditioning, they're not paying heating, they're leasing out their state buildings, they're doing conversion projects, all these things, and it's go back to work. So I don't think it's as bad as the NOAA with the Santa Rosa office, that they just don't have an office, but I think there are going to be some interesting particulars coming out of this. Okay, and so Dave, you and then you do have your track with you, and Dave was patient enough to whittle it down to the 30. A lot of these are watching and see what we do. We are coordinating with Aqua, and so of knowing some of their positions and and we are very supportive, and we always have been of being a good partners with Aqua, but some of the bills that they are working on, the policy issues, just really, unless it's doing them a favor, it has no correlation with the work and the priorities of MPWMD. So that's usually where I rely on Dave, who has, we'll talk to the executive director and whatnot, and then that's, where we will change our stance depending on the conversation.
Yeah, and let me add to that a little bit. I did speak with our area rep, Jennifer Rotz, yesterday, and they have 3 bills that aren't even on our tracker, and they're all opposed unless amended or outright opposed. So Lori, for your edification, we are not interested or tracking Assembly Bills 263, 362, and 794, which
and 601 that they don't like.
Okay, so I didn't even have that one.
Well, for 362, that's gonna have to be a John, because that's one of my other clients' sponsored bill.
Was that a tribal thing?
Yes,
Yeah.
to put tribal beneficial uses in consideration with the 9 regional water boards.
Okay, but I did want to point out that in the tracker, we've got 3 Senate bills that we are following. And on 350, Senate Bill 350, Aqua's position is opposed unless amended. And so with the direction of this committee, I would like to go in lockstep with Aqua on that one. On Senate Bill 394, Aqua's position is support, and they are a sponsor of that bill. So again, we'd like to support that one. And then Senate Bill 454, they are also a support.
Yeah, that bill was heard yesterday. I was listening to the hearing because they were doing a special informational hearing in Senate local government on all the Brown Act bills. So I got to see Aqua present on that. So
as opposed to my staff note where I said everything is just follow and we don't have a position, I think we would mimic the Aqua positions on those 3 Senate bills.
Okay, and you said the McNerney 454?
Yeah, yep. And so we can do letters of support and send them in.
Well, let's let the board, the committee weigh in.
Yep.
And see if they agree with those recommendations. Go ahead, Karen and George, give your thoughts.
I just want, of those three bills, I missed one of them, SB 350 and 454. What was the third?
394, also Senate bill.
And so you're proposing we take position consistent with Aqua's on all three?
Yeah.
And the position is oppose on one and support two, the second two.
It would be opposed unless amended. And the question to you, Dave.
On 350, yeah.
Yeah, did you want, because the hearing's it's already gone, do you want to wait
Yeah,
till to see, and I can reach out to the staff person, oppose unless amended, they're interesting bills and letters and positions to have. Because once you meet with them, you go to oppose or neutral real quick. So
Yeah.
I'd like to see at the hearing what changed.
Yeah, what
They
came
should
out
have an
today.
official position now.
Right.
Uh-huh. So I guess you'll find out probably today or tomorrow or something, what happened at the hearing?
Yep, it'd be Monday. We have our early morning advocacy calls with Aqua.
Yeah, and Karen, George, and Ian, you should know that Aqua itself, which, it's our industry organization, we typically follow their positions, except when it's clear there's no benefit or detriment to us out on the coast. But they're in disarray. They have they've lost their executive director. They've lost a number of key staff positions, and we don't know really what's going on with them. Cindy Tuck, who's the head of legislative affairs, is still there, but she's not doing a lot of the day-to-day. They have, other people. So while we are generally supportive, and traditionally in the past we've deciphered a lot of the Sacramento things for our legislative delegation, we're not really close with Dawn Addis as our assembly person. We need to work on that one. And then, John Laird, in known quantity, obviously, but he's got his own kind of, he walks to the beat of his own drummer, so to speak, because he's been around Sacramento for so long. So I won't say we're in isolation, but Aqua's not working really well. And then our relationship with our Sacramento delegation is not as good as it has been in probably, the last 7-8 years. So.
And why is that?
I think geography, for one. Dawn is much further away, so we don't have just the ready contact. And then John Laird, we've got great access to, but as I said, he's so independent thinking because he's just been around Sacramento for so long that, in Monty's case, we were the kitchen cabinet. We gave him a lot of advice on water related issues.
So Karen, with Dawn Addis, she is from the San Luis Obispo area, Morro Bay, and so forth. So she tends to spend more of her time down south in that area. We've had her. We took her on a tour of the Pure Water Project and tried to get her there more often, but not as much time as someone who's direct in this area. John Laird, is a known quantity. We've had him for so long, and his experience with the resources, Secretary of Resources, and other positions that he's had has been very helpful. But like Dave says, he's got his agenda as far as the type of legislation he's following. He is very acceptable to us, and we do meet with him on a regular basis. So that's a good thing. And then the other additive to that is we do have a relationship with the Speaker, Robert Rivas. And though he isn't our representatives, we can meet him when we did as we did with the mayor and so forth. So that's a plus. So it's
yeah. And I think, John, when we're up in Sacramento, we need to work on Dawn a little bit, because I remember the last meeting we had, we gave her a position on some legislation, and a week later she voted the opposite direction. So, it wasn't the the greatest kickoff last year.
So when are you expecting to see her? You said when you go to Sacramento. When do we think
Yeah,
maybe-
so when Mike McCullough comes over April 3rd, so sometime after that, we want to go out and visit with the State Water Board on the CDO issues.
Mhm.
And while we're there, we'll try to meet with probably Revis's staff, Dawn and her staff, and of course John Laird if the timing all works out,
Mhm.
just as a courtesy. But we will need Laird, Addis, possibly Revis to weigh in with Joaquin and others at the State Water Board to
Mhm.
say one simple ask, which is, if the district comes to you to review the cease and desist order situation, make it a priority. We're going to need the political heat to tell them and their staff to begin work on it, because the staff's normal reaction will be, well, let's wait until that project comes online and then we'll look at it. And we don't want that. So I think that'll be our primary use of our legislative delegation, which will be elevate the CDO so that they'll give it a look beginning in June instead of waiting till December.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, George.
I have a question on the assembly bills. Just my quick look at them. 1367 Gallagher. They talk about the California Water Plan to state that water storage is the preferred method to be used by the state to meet increased water demands by all categories. What does that mean?
That means build the site's reservoir and raise Shasta Dam, and it's kind of doubling down.
And the Delta Conveyance Project.
Right, and you may recall, I think it was still Prop 1, but there was a very large pool of money for storage, but it was oddly tied to improving water quality in the Delta. It was a kind of a wording to make it sound environmental, but it was actually about storage. One of those was a raise to the Los Vaqueros reservoir outside of Oakland, kind of in the Livermore area. And it was a huge, almost $200 million. And ultimately, East Bay Mud and Contra Costa Water District bailed on that project. And so that money has become reavailable, but it's all managed through the California Water Commission, which is this odd duck of, it's not the State Water Board, it's not the Department of Water Resources, it's kind of this standalone commission, and they are very oriented to the Central Valley Project and storage and new reservoirs. So I think that Gallagher bill is kind of geared towards just protecting this kind of new think about additional storage in California, but it'll end up being primarily Central Valley related.
Okay, thank you for that. I have a follow-up question basically about how do we look at the issue of the county and whatever their legislative priorities are, because they may be, the big brother in this coalition of what's our county looking for. But I think we're in second place in that. I don't know that any other, water agency would have the muscle between the two of us.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because separating the county from the County Water Resources Agency, John, JEA used to be working for the county. until, I don't know, 6 years ago or whatever it is, John. The county does not do a very good job of legislative support for water issues. They do a very good job as a county, you know, with CSAC and the National Association and so forth. On the water side, we've offered to help them out, and we sort of have from time to time, but they don't. I would not say that the County Water Resources Agency is a leader in state or federal lobbying efforts. Their approach to, you know, they have a bunch of dam retrofits and improvements that they have to do. Their approach was they asked John Laird to put in $160 million request for earmarks in the governor's budget 3 years ago. And that's just not how it works, you know, and it was blatant overreach and a lack of thought. And of course, it got dialed back to, I think, 6 million. So anyway, I don't think they're the big brother in the room when it comes to water related lobbying.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I just didn't know what their activity level was. And I just thought if we were on two sides of an issue, that would not be good. But since
Right.
it's not that active, then that kind of answers the question.
Yeah.
Through the chair, I might, I have some thoughts about ways we might be able to improve the relationship with Dawn Addis, but I think I'd like to talk to you, Dave, first, offline.
That'd be great.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Yeah, I think her interests align very much with ours and the peninsula in general. It's just we need to get more familial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kate Daniels has a longstanding relationship with her. But then there's all these questions about all the different roles that Kate is playing at the moment, all the different hats she's wearing. So that's why it gets complicated. I think that's why we should maybe discuss it offline.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So back to the mayor's point, are there any specific reservations about the 3 Senate bills that I said we would adopt a aqua-oriented position?
I have no reason to oppose any of those. I mean, whatever their recommendations are, they stay pretty well connected also, and I think focused on some of the bills that we are definitely interested in. So I have no questions about following their lead.
Okay.
Okay, then Karen, do you have anything before we move on?
No, thank you. I'm in the same place as George.
Okay, that's good enough directions, Dave.
Thank you.
Just go ahead, firm it up as you feel comfortable.
Yeah, and the last item, item 4, I do want to call your attention to 4A. 4B we just covered. That's the low income ratepayer assistance bill that will join the Aqua group, and the 4C was that Huffman tax rebate parity act, or rebate tax parity act. But I want to focus on 4A, which is Senate Bill 473. I have asked Aqua to look at this. So Jennifer, who was here yesterday, is supposedly going to take this back and figure out which Aqua staffer should get engaged. But this exhibit is a summary of a bill that is being sponsored by Steve Padilla out of Chula Vista. As you well know, Cal-Am is headquartered in San Diego. This is a San Diego area senator. There's some other personal relationships between Kevin Tilden and Steve Padilla. So it reads pretty clearly to us that Cal-Am probably led this charge. A little bit of background. About 5 years ago, Public Utilities Commissioner Sharoma introduced a movement to end the water revenue adjustment mechanism, which is in effect a revenue makeup provision for the investor-owned utilities. So the utilities would say, oh my gosh, we didn't sell as much water as we intended, so we didn't achieve our revenue goals. Commission, please give us the lost revenues back over a 5-year period, something like that. And that decoupling has been in effect really since about 2006. And the idea was, or the initiative for it was, if we want to promote conservation, yet a water utility is 80 to 90% fixed costs, but we want pricing signals in the volumetric side of the equation, then the utilities are going to have 70% of the revenue come from volumetric sales, but 80% of their expenses are fixed. And so if there's heavy conservation, then they won't reach their volumetric sales targets or the revenue targets. And so if there's a shortfall, then in the subsequent 5, sometimes longer period, they will have a makeup provision for the shortfall. And that's called decoupling. What it didn't do is put the onus of bad forecasting or bad business management on the shoulders of the utilities. So you might have revenue shortfalls because chemical costs went up, or labor went up, or energy went up. And these are not things that happen due to conservation, but they packaged it all into a pretty little box and called it conservation, put a bow on it, and said, oh no, the reason we didn't make our revenues was due to conservation. So this last go round, 2 years ago, there was legislation put into place that said the Public Utilities Commission should consider decoupling or the impacts of conservation. And a bill was passed, and it was an assembly member in the LA area, and I can't remember who it was. And in the most recent rate cases, they got delayed because that bill passed, and so they were able to resubmit their applications based on with a revenue adjustment mechanism and without a revenue adjustment mechanism. And then ultimately, to everyone's surprise, the commission did not approve the reinstatement of the revenue adjustment mechanism. Now, they're still appealing their rate cases, but they're also implementing the decisions as decided without the revenue adjustment mechanism. At the same time, they went out and they got a new legislator, Steve Padilla, to sponsor this SB 473 that is going to kind of enforce the decoupling. Fran, when I showed this to her, Fran Farina, was apoplectic. And we've talked about whether we should put Lori and John to work on opposing this bill. But when you read this sugar-coated summary, it sounds like we would be opposing water conservation, which we are not. And you look at the sponsor, it's the California Water Association. Their executive director, Jennifer Capillo, used to be Cal-Am's lobbyist in Sacramento. She took over from Jack Hawk as executive director, but is very much a pro investor-owned utility supporter. When you read this thing, you'll see that they cite 4 water utilities implementing decoupling saving so much money. Well, those 4 utilities are California American Water, Cal Water Service, Golden State Water, and San Jose Water, the big 4 Class A investor-owned water utilities. So the question to the group here is, do you want us, the district, you know, as a sleepy little outpost on the Central Coast, to take up initiating opposition to this Senate bill? And if so, there would be some time and resources involved, but basically we would task John and Lori with our own summary, and we would build that summary probably from the public advocate's office briefing in the last rate case, possibly our own briefing and others, how they briefed the decoupling issue in the last rate case, build a summary, and then lay out those 4 investor-owned utilities service areas and figure out who the assembly members and senators are in those service areas, and then take that summary to them and just, you know, bring it to their attention. One last piece, that other piece of legislation that favored the decoupling, John Laird had told Melody Crislock from Public Water Now, well, hey, what's the beef about? There wasn't a single senator who opposed that legislation back then. So we run the risk of repeating history here, where because of how sugar-coated this summary is, you may have no opposition to this bill, this Senate Bill 473. So I don't know what more to say.
Also, Dave, Jennifer Capillo used to be the lobbyist for Monterey County.
Oh, really? Oh,
Oh.
when she was at Nosson, yeah.
Yep. So just adding that on there.
Okay, George and Karen, what are your thoughts?
Couple of questions. Well, first of all, now Public Advocates has been active in this issue, right?
Yeah.
Both at the commission and in Sacramento, right?
Correct.
So there's
think,
a possibility of coordinating with them, yes?
Yeah, and Fran did inquire whether they had seen it, and her response was, yeah, they've seen it and they're tracking it. They don't know if they're going to formally oppose it.
Okay, so we could just informally explore that with them.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what Fran thinks about becoming active on the legislative level on this. So those are my 2. First things I would do is discuss with Fran, and then explore possibilities of coordinating with Public Advocates. And we might, if that seems like a possible way to go, there are probably other organizations we could approach after that look out for a low-income utility people, customers, and environmental justice organizations, maybe.
Okay, George?
Yeah, I have a little different angle on it. Anyway, I like the idea of opposing it, but what I'd like to, and we can oppose it because it's CalAm and it's an impact on our ratepayers. But I just want to say, suppose it's 5, 6, 7 years from now, and we run the system. What would our position be if we ran the system? And that may be an angle that we could think about, but I'm not sure what that leads to. So.
No, it's a great question, because when we had the drought from 2012 to 2015, in California, 85% of water is provided by public agencies. And LADWP, Department of Water and Power, had a huge deficit because there were conservation requirements and they did not get the revenues that they had expected. And so they had the exact same issue, but they don't, there's no automatic makeup provision in the public agencies. So the way the public agencies tend to deal with it is when they do rate making, they include money to go to reserves, and hopefully those reserves carry them through drought. Extended drought, your reserves start getting drained. And then, you implement another set of rates, but the rate making is all subject to Proposition 218. And you can subsidize a drought reserve, but you can't, for example, we talked about low income ratepayers. You can't actually subsidize the low income ratepayers. I can't have you pay a rate that includes a subsidy to a low income ratepayer program. I can have you pay a rate to build reserves for times of drought, but extended drought, you drain those reserves. And so, these are two different kind of worlds where when you have this decoupling, you are virtually guaranteed that you will make up the revenue.
Well, and I think that's the failure of the PUC to establish a rule system that allows for some things. As I understand it, the PUC allows, and maybe Fran could elaborate on this, or you too, Dave. I don't look for an elaboration on just as an observation. I think the PUC allows the budget to determine whether they get whether they've lost revenue or not, or reach their revenue goals. Or is it actual experience? And then after the fact, you look at the expenditures compared to, or the needs or whatever after the fact. And as I understand it, it's a forward-looking potential revenue rather than based on actual experience. And I think that's kind of not the way to budget for contingencies and just surprise events and so on. I think you need to, anyway, that's an observation more than anything.
Yeah, the main thing is, I thought it was a good question, Dave, because George, because I came from the same vantages, which is we are preparing to own this large agency, right? So what would be our stand going into a successful ownership of this large agency? And my thing was, well, we need to play as though we're that large now. We need to be talking about those type of issues that concerning Cal-Am at this level, and would concern us if we're successful in taking it over, right? So I was right there with you, but right now it's either oppose what they're doing, and if we're successful, then yeah, we may have to take a different side, because it's our responsibility to finance that entity. And so we wouldn't want to say now, as this public body, what they're doing is okay as a privately owned body, if that makes sense, right? And
Yeah,
so
that's a very good point. We would
Yeah.
not have the same privilege.
Right, so it wouldn't hurt us to be against it now and take a similar stand, which is we would need similar type of money, even though it would come from a different vantage point, right? So I really want to just get to, and I heard people want to talk to Fran. I don't think she's on this call right now, is she?
No, she couldn't.
And so if we have time to hold off on it, Dave, we could frame it up, get her a viewpoint on it, and discuss it at our next meeting. And I think that's really where we're at now. But my thing is we should be talking about those issues, because if it's impacting an entity that we want to control, whether it's 4 or 5 years from now, then we should understand the legislation that's putting them in the position that they're in, and how it may impact us if we were fortunate enough to take it over. So I thought the way you put it, Dave, was excellent. It's just, I think the group wants more information. And so we would talk about it a little bit later.
Yeah. And I think when we go to the pursue it or discuss it further, we'll want to keep in mind that the way we would, as a public agency, would structure rates is a lot of differences. And
yeah, of course, but what we're talking about is weighing in against what Cal-Am is doing, right? So us talking about how we would do it in the future may not have any impact on this legislation and this act that they're trying to do. And so,
Mhm.
you
Yeah,
know,
I think just timeline wise, and John, maybe you can advise here. Our group, the committee is not going to meet again for 3 months as a quarterly kind of schedule, but the legislative schedule is starting to move. So if we want to oppose this and prepare materials and figure out, who might be affected, we would need to get moving. So I'll arrange for Fran and Karen to talk. But I would need some direction, and obviously John and Lori would need some direction.
Yeah, and you're right, Dave. This is the time when things are starting to move. That now that everything's been introduced and the waiting period is passing soon. So I would say toward the end of this month and then right after the Easter break, they get really busy moving these bills.
And I don't propose that we would be activists with a lot of meetings, but at a minimum, preparing an alternate reality, to this summary, and then getting it in front of legislators whose ratepayers are affected.
Mhm.
There's some footwork involved, but it's not as if we're going to ask John and Lori to actively, beat the drum, other than getting it in front of people.
Yeah.
right. I don't see what harm that would do, Karen and George. So let's try to give some direction here. So Karen and George, what do you think?
I'm a little reluctant to take the lead on trying to oppose this because we're in the Big Four, and we're also a unique public agency because we're straddling the fence of trying to take over, and there's probably no other place in California that's in the same place we are. We're unlikely to provide to attract any allies outside of the public advocate's office. We're going to be a lone wolf out there making our own arguments. I kind of think that maybe we can use this against Cal-Am as we go forward in terms of how they treat the customer. And that may be the angle that we ought to consider, regardless of what we have to take a position or not. But it's hard for me to get on board to make a big formal process out of this, because I think there's so many odds against us, and we're in a very unique battleground, which is very local.
So Dave, you may just want to say what, position watch or neutral or something like that. Probably watch.
Well, Dave, are you talking about a big formal to do? I thought you just said form up some type of a summary position letter and ship it out to the senators. You're not talking about going to hearings and
I
holding
can't.
up stuff.
I
Just
could not.
speak to what George is talking about, a big to do or limited participation.
It's a minor to do, but our fingerprints would of course be on it, because somebody's going to go, where did this come from? And they'll figure it out. But that's really the issue.
Yeah, I'm just thinking we might be good to get before the committee. The fact, as I recall, public advocates, one of their arguments was that the history showed that the decoupling was not in fact successful in its stated objective of encouraging
Well,
conservation.
and that's exactly, there's probably 2 to 3 days worth of work here in the end on district side. On John and Lori's side, there's probably also 2 to 3 days of work.
Mm-hmm.
But then we just, at that point, we leave it alone. But you're absolutely right, Karen. We would go get that public advocate's office brief, pull some really salient quotes out of it, footnote it, and put that in our one-page summary, and then get it in front of assembly members and senators who overlap with those big 4 Class A water utilities. Basically, that's the effort. So it's more what the mayor said. It's not a big to do, but it's still a little lift.
Well, and I was
But
talking
No.
about not only it's a little lift, but it's not like we're putting ourselves out front and
That's-
leading the charge to defeat this thing. It's just we're providing some background information.
yeah, I think that John and Lori can probably attest that there would be breadcrumbs and they would lead to the district.
And would that be a negative thing? I guess that's the question right now.
That's a great question because, you know, this is one of the first rate cases where I think in 15 years that the investor-owned utilities are back on their heels. You know, I do think that they took a beating this last go-round. And what had happened actually was that all of the effort was on Cal-Am's rate case because they were pushing to bring back decoupling. And then suddenly people pulled back and put all their money on the Golden State Water rate case, thinking they had a chance to better affect that outcome. And they didn't get what they wanted either. So it's an interesting time. And if we did oppose, they would certainly go, oh my gosh, who's doing this? We thought there'd be no opposition because, you know, as you read it, it sounds like it's very pro-conservation.
Well, it's not just in opposition, it's in support of the PUC's original position.
Yeah.
So that's the plus side for being, you know, the position we're thinking about.
So, okay, we have to firm up what we want to do. It's three of us. What do two of us want to do? Tell Dave to move forward with this background information, or we don't believe it's worth the time and effort to weigh in on this? George and then Karen.
Yeah, I think the smaller effort is worth it. And just so we identify ourselves with the position we want, even though we're not making a capital case out of it.
And
Okay.
I think we can do that while keeping in mind that we'll be, if we succeed in acquiring the water system, we'll be the rate maker, and I think we can bring useful information into the record on this without creating problems for ourselves if we at a later stage.
Yeah.
I think that's entirely doable. I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah, I agree that I don't think it will cause us too much problems. And again, we're trying to play in this league, and so sometimes we need to bat up, right? At least get into the warm up circle as though we're ready to bat up, and weighing in on this on behalf of ratepayers in a sense, just providing background information, not leading the band is a good idea. So, all right, just go ahead and move forward with that then, Dave.
Okay.
Yeah.
And anything else? Go ahead.
I can make some time to help as needed outside of these quarterly meetings we have.
And Karen, can you put a call into Fran? She will love to talk to you about this topic.
I will.
And I think
I'll just call her directly.
And I think it will affirm that she'd love to get out in front of it. Lori or John, if you could just check and see which committee this is going to go to and if it's scheduled, and let me know.
Okay.
And if you foresee that it's not even worth it, then let me know that as well. Otherwise, I'll put it in my schedule for next week to build a little one-page rebuttal, and we can gameplay this thing.
Okay, we'll look into it and just kind of behind the scenes and see what it looks like as far as how far this bill will go.
Yeah.
It's been referred to Energy, Utilities, and Commerce.
Okay.
But
No.
Okay, we'll no, we won't do it here in this meeting.
Yep.
We'll let you guys decide and
Let us do our thing. Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, Dave, if you think we missed the critical point of entry, then just let us know you shut it down.
Yeah.
We're going from there. But thank you guys for putting that together. Anything else from the general manager's report?
Nope.
Anything from the other members as we proceed to close?
No, good meeting.
Okay, next scheduled meeting, I think Dave already said about 3 months from now, so.
Yeah, Sarah will start looking at the calendar and we'll get something out.
Okay, okay.
And I don't know if Roger and Chris, I see you're still here. You know how we talked a couple years ago, it was a lot of federal stuff and funding. This year, our focus is a little more on Sacramento and state stuff, but we appreciate your time.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Understood. The background's helpful.
Yeah, appreciate you both, appreciate Lori and John for you guys' advocacy. I think if that's it, there's nothing else on the agenda, so we will adjourn this meeting.
Hey,
Thanks.
Have a good
Thank
day.
Thanks for all your time.
Thanks,
Okay.
all of
Yeah,
you.
All right.
Good meeting.
Okay.
Good
Bye.
meeting.
See you guys soon.
Bye.